Hi, I'm Kate Wagner of McMansion Hell, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
It's U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Today, we welcome Vivian Howard and Ben Knight, the couple made famous for 5 years on PBS's A Chef's Life, and soon to appear on a new show coming up later in 2019. And they are also modernist homeowners. Joining us in the studio is returning co-host Rebekah Laney, Development Director for U.S. Modernist Radio. And now, your host of the #1 architecture podcast in the zip code, George Smart.
Howdy, folks. I have a little lower voice today. I can do my Al Jarreau really, really well. The good news is our zip code is growing. People love this area, the Research Triangle of North Carolina, and they are moving here by the thousands. That's not so good for our roads, or our schools, or any infrastructure, really. But hey, at least people aren't moving away. They come for many reasons, but in part they come for the cuisine. Between Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill, we have a ton of James Beard nominees and award winners that make an evening out great for foodies. It's a bit harder to find great restaurants outside the state major cities, with 3 particular exceptions, which we will get to in a minute. I want to welcome back Rebekah Laney, who raises funds to support our nonprofit. Welcome, Rebekah.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Tell folks about the upcoming George Matsumoto Prize and their opportunity to sponsor this event.
NCMH created the Matsumoto Prize in 2012 to honor George Matsumoto, one of the founding faculty members at North Carolina State University's College of Design. Matsumoto created some of North Carolina's most well-known and well-loved modernist houses. The Matsumoto Prize encourages young architects, designers, and prospective clients to continue the modernist movement in houses so important to North Carolina's artistic leadership. The prize meaningfully and powerfully engages the public with the architecture they love and showcases exceptional modernist architects and designers in North Carolina. If you'd like to sponsor this competition, please be in touch. We'll share more information with you.
Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll.
In a world we are kind of making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll was sipping her trademark Stoli Pear Martini in Davos, the elite Swiss gathering of billionaires and celebrities that's held every year in January. Suddenly, the lights went out, Click. And when they turned back on, Click. One of the various Kardashians' diamond necklaces was missing. Out of the corner of her eye, Angela spotted a brilliant, bald architect who looked eerily like Dr. Evil stuffing jumbo tiger shrimp into his pants pockets. But Jean Nouvel's appetite for fine seafood is not important right now. Angela, her keen observation skills at full power, saw a serving cart rattle slightly and deduced that the thief was hiding behind the trays of filet mignon and manchego bruschetta. Taking a move from her martial arts training, a quick kick sent the serving cart careening into Nouvel, making a huge mess, but exposing the thief, a former acrobat with Cirque du Soleil, who was quickly apprehended by Davos security. Ever grateful, several Kardashians even picked up brooms and helped clean up. Today, Angela Roll uses her incredible resourcefulness and architectural training to specialize in modernist houses, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovations to sweeping up with the Kardashians. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or 919-995-0550.
Thanks, Tom. Kinston is about as Eastern North Carolina as you can get. They have lots of barbecue, a minor league baseball team that's pretty good. They support what's left of the tobacco industry in the state, and they keep up the famous CSS Neuse, one of the last Confederate ironclad ships. Although Donald Trump is considering restoring it to attack Canada, but I digress. Kinston never really had a great restaurant, except if you like Eastern North Carolina barbecue, and then it's the Las Vegas of the South.
That all changed when Chef Vivian Howard and artist Ben Knight came to town in 2006 from New York and opened the restaurant Chef and the Farmer. Later, 2 more restaurants, the Boiler Room and Benny's Big Time in Wilmington, North Carolina. Then there was their TV show, the award-winning PBS television series A Chef's Life, which won 2 Daytime Emmys and a Peabody Award. Vivian has been featured on CBS Sunday Morning, Rachel Ray, Family Circle,
The magazine, not the comic strip.
Dr. Oz, O Magazine, The New York Times, Garden and Gun, and nearly every newspaper and TV station in North Carolina. She is the author of the cookbook Deep Run Roots and has another book in development. We first came across this talented couple when their modernist house in Deep Run was nominated and won a George Matsumoto Prize for North Carolina residential design.
Ben joins us here in the studio, and Vivian joins us on the road back from Raleigh to Deep Run. Welcome, Ben and Vivian.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's start with your house. How did you decide on a modernist house in Deep Run, NC, of all places?
Well, we were living in Deep Run in my parents' house, and we wanted to settle there and build our own house. And the modernist aesthetic is just what we were drawn to at the most simplest. It's a little more complex than that, and I'll let Ben speak to that.
We wanted to draw on the landscape around us. And so one of the buildings that we both loved was a shed that was directly behind her parents' house. It was an old kind of white wood shed. You see a lot of them in the area. And it's just a single slant roof. And so as we
It was a chicken coop.
Yeah, it was a chicken coop. So as we started to kind of think about what it is we wanted to do, we came across a house that was designed in a butterfly style
Butterfly roof, yeah.
Butterfly roof style. And we were like, oh, that's really cool. And then as that idea developed, the architect on the project, Ann Clark, kind of took these ideas and molded them into what you see today.
Ben, remind me, Ann Clark was a family friend of your mother's?
She's a good friend of my mom's, and she had done some funky office design work for my mom in Chicago. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Now,
So
how did you get this built in Deep Run? Because I imagine that's not in the wheelhouse of most Deep Run contractors to do modern design.
How big is Deep Run?
Oh.
Well, Deep Run is just, everywhere is called something. So,
Schitt's Creek.
Yeah.
yeah, and so Deep Run is just a fire district. It's what this farming kind of community is just named. So there are no architects or really no contractors like us in Deep Run, and certainly no one that had built a house like ours. But there were a lot of people in our circle, customers and people who we knew that wanted to build our house, no matter
Yeah, they just wanted to do it. They wanted to build Ben and Vivian's house.
So they were lining up.
They actually were, I think, calling each other behind.
Some serious name dropping happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty funny, actually.
That's awesome. So your builder and your architect, Ann Clark, your builder, was that a local builder? Or?
It is. His name is Ned Grady, and he's a second-generation builder and more larger suburban-style houses, and then he does a lot of beach stuff. So he did have some experience with a little bit more contemporary. Yeah, a little bit more contemporary architecture, but and he was a longtime friend and customer at the restaurant. So.
That's fantastic. So were you both on board with the design, or were there compromises as to more modern versus traditional architecture?
Luckily, we are both really drawn to the same type of architecture. If not, I'm not sure what would have happened because we're both pretty stubborn.
Yeah, I can't imagine, if we couldn't decide on what to do for the house, how that would have wound up.
Rock, paper, scissors?
It would have been one ugly house.
For all of you wondering, it is a beautiful house. Beautiful house.
So, Vivian, Deep Run is actually in the suburbs of Kinston in Jones County, right?
No, it's in Lenoir County, and it is outside of Kinston, about 20 minutes from Kinston.
Yeah, I got that wrong. Somehow I had read that Deep Run was in Jones County, but I got my geography.
We used to live in Jones County, and our house was actually oriented and designed to sit on a piece of property that we lived in Jones County.
Oh, okay.
So when we were living in her parents' house, we decided that after having, twins, that another set of arms around was pretty important. And so we decided to build something closer to there.
Luckily, they're right across the street,
right across the street. So, but it did impact where we could build the house, because if we would have built on the south side of the road, it would have ruined the whole thing because of the way the house is oriented.
So Vivian's parents are close by, and I understand your parents moved here as well?
My mom lives in Raleigh. She lives in Oakwood.
Okay.
Yeah, in an old house.
Oh, yeah. We know Oakwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great area.
Vivian, as you were growing up in Deep Run, what was it like?
Well, I tell the story that I, as early as I can remember, I wanted to leave. And I really wanted to be able to, order Chinese food and have a Chinese person bring it to my door and, unwrap the origami carton that the food came in and, bust out my chopsticks like a boss.
Whole ethnic experience.
Yes. And I wanted to, when we would go to town, when we would go to Kinston, we would get dressed up. It was like country mice going to town. And I wanted to, if I'm getting dressed up, I wanted that town to have at least an Applebee's, for Christ's sake.
That is high-class living right there.
It just closed, by the way.
Applebee's closed?
Yeah. We're a one-chain restaurant town now.
Wow.
Just a Ruby Tuesday.
Yeah.
So it was, our life in Deep Run was all about farming, and specifically farming tobacco. So the summers were our busiest time, and there was not a whole lot going on except for farming.
So where did life take you next?
I went to boarding school. When I was 14, I went to Salem Academy, which is an all-girls school in Winston-Salem, and then I went to another boarding school that had boys my junior year.
That's an upgrade, okay.
School. Yeah, I was just always figuring out what I wanted. And then I went to NC State and moved to New York after college.
And you worked in advertising?
I did. I worked at Gray Worldwide on the Pantene account, so the hair product.
That's why your hair looks so fantastic all the time.
Oh, no, but thank you.
So, Ben, can she do that little hair toss Pantene thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
She even came up with I guess a jingle. Would you call it a jingle, Viv?
I don't think it has much of a ring to it, so no.
Oh.
I was on the copy end of things, and the things that came out during my tenure there was smoother than smooth. I know that's brilliant.
How did you make the transition from advertising to food and cooking?
Well, after 9/11, there were a lot of people in my world, my peers, that were re-examining what they had chosen to do professionally, because there's this sense that, you could go to work and never come home. And I had never wanted to be in advertising. I wanted to be a journalist. And so I decided that I was going to quit my job in advertising and pursue journalism in some form. And I had always worked in restaurants in college. And so that was really the only expertise or experience that I had to draw from. So I started waiting tables, and that's where I met Ben.
Where was this, Ben?
West Village is a little new restaurant. We were both on the opening team called Voyage.
So what took your path from Chicago to New York?
I guess it's a little different, but somewhat similar. I needed to leave home, too. I was ready to leave Chicago. I'd spent pretty much my whole life there, and my family's from Chicago, and I had started painting post-college and really just enjoyed it thoroughly, and was spending a lot more time doing it on the weekends and supplementing my life with it. And when I was 25, decided I was going to take the plunge. And if you want to be a painter, I think
being a starving artist
you want to move to New York and be a starving artist and live the mythology. So That's what brought me to New York.
What do people move to Chicago for? To play baseball?
To work. I guess so. I mean,
Yeah, it's a city of broad shoulders.
it's a
Eat
city.
Chicago-style pizza.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't you know?
Yeah. You move to Chicago to gain 15 pounds.
Yes.
So you moved to New York to be an artist and wound up at a restaurant.
Well, you know,
Like a lot of artists.
That's how it works, you
Yep.
know.
Those
You
starving
gotta
artists
pay the
got to eat
bills.
somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. And plus you get a meal usually. So kill two birds with one stone on that one.
Well, it was interesting because the restaurant where we ended up working together and actually opening, we were on the opening team. The concept of the restaurant was Southern food via Africa. And I was from the South and then was from Chicago. So I was really, for me, it's the type of restaurant, the type of food, and the storytelling around the food was really resonated with what I knew. And I imagine for Ben it was a little different.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Southern food. I had eaten biscuits. But
Fried okra, sweet tea.
I mean, there's not a lot of collards and grits in Chicago.
No.
So, well, there might be more now, but there's barbecue. Yeah, I didn't know anything about it, so it was pretty new to me. And at that point, I needed a job, and this was the first place that didn't say you needed to have 2 years of New York fine dining restaurant experience to work in there. So it was a perfect fit.
And you met this great woman.
Well, that turned out to be the best part.
Icing on the cake, I think.
Yeah. But it took me a little while to realize how lucky I was. So.
And what was the moment that happened?
What he's saying is I had to pursue him.
The moment, I think I remember this pretty vividly, and I have a terrible memory. So Vivian was picking up extra shifts at the time because Voyage had gone from being very busy to being a little bit slow, and so we were all kind of hurting for money. And she had picked up extra shifts at the hostess stand. And I remember her working at the hostess stand one night, and we had just kind of started seeing each other. And I spent the whole night up at the hostess stand because there was nobody in the restaurant. And I was enjoying the company. So,
And that was the moment. That stuck in your mind.
Oh, sweet.
So you guys got together, and at some point, you decided to move back to North Carolina. What precipitated that decision?
A club?
We had been running a little soup business out of our apartment in Harlem, and we had some traction with that, some limited success. We went around the city delivering our soup on our day off and collecting parking tickets. And
and eating lunch.
Yes, I mean it was a really fun, romantic time. But we decided that we were going to open a legitimate storefront in New York, like a soup business, a real one. And we told my family about that, and that's not something that they really wanted to have happen. So they countered and said we could open a restaurant. I remember it as like anywhere in North Carolina.
That's how it was phrased. That's what I remember too.
That was the initial offer.
Yeah, but they had already purchased a building.
Yeah, it was clear we could
So
open a
long as it's
restaurant
here.
anywhere inside this building in downtown Kinston that they had already
Would
purchased.
you like the front of the building or the back of the building?
Really twisting your arm there, guys.
Parents are funny that way.
Yeah.
And this was what, around 2006, 7?
2005.
2005.
Yeah. Well, it's probably, I think it was when we came down here and they said, well, you know, hey, come down. We have something we want to talk to you about. It was in February. Is that right, Viv? I think it was like February.
Yes.
It was after I had come there for Christmas for the first time. I think it was February, and they pulled us aside and said, how would you like to do this?
Now, I've driven through mid-2000s Kinston, and no offense, it was not the most appealing downtown ever. I mean, what did you think when you went and saw this building?
It looked like where I was living in New York, so
Just like home.
except there wasn't all the other stuff surrounding it. But
Yeah.
No Chinese restaurants.
instead of the Upper West Side, just a stone's throw away, we had tobacco fields. So it was a little. I tell people this a lot when they ask about that, but Kinston was not unlike just the bones of it, any of the places I had lived to that point in my adult life. So I was always kind of living in those artsy, on the edge neighborhoods, and it felt that way, only it wasn't in a city.
Need a little extra life brought into it.
Needed some life.
So where did the basis for The Chef and the Farmer come from? How did you decide upon what style restaurant you were opening?
Then I'm going to let you tell this.
This is usually your job. We had set about actually thinking about doing a version of this soup storefront that we had talked about and kind of converted it into a lunch-style restaurant. And I think after being down here a few months and starting on the project, we kind of were like, well, there's plenty of places to eat lunch, but there's nowhere to eat dinner. And we thought,
unless you went to the Applebee's, I guess.
And we were Ruby Tuesdays folks at that point.
Well, you can eat salad bar.
And so that's, I think we had a friend come and visit us, and he was there for a couple of days, and that's when the idea really started to take hold. And from there, we went in, full bore into this idea of farm to fork restaurant in the middle of farm country. And we kind of felt like if that didn't work there, then it's really not going to work for everybody. It's only going to work for a few.
So how was the restaurant received once it opened for Kinstonians and
Kinstonites?
It was a little bit more expensive than the Piggly Wiggly.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Well, we were busy from the beginning.
From day one, yeah.
And I think there was two reasons for that. One is that Kinston, while it's very out of the way, it's about 30 minutes from Goldsboro and Greenville and New Bern and all towns that have a larger population than Kinston, but really no restaurants to speak of. So people came to celebrate their anniversaries and their birthdays in Kinston. And also, it took us about a year to get the restaurant open. And in that time, I think word had gotten around that these two young kids had come from New York and were going to open this restaurant, this high-end restaurant in Kinston. And people wanted to come and see what the hell that looked like.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely a tourist destination.
Well, there's also, we have, as Vivian kind of alluded to, the geography played a much bigger role in our early success than one might think. And people drive through 70 to the beach. We have a pretty well-known private school that draws from populations in those surrounding towns. So those parents were already coming to Kinston.
Was that Parrott Academy?
Parrott Academy.
Yeah.
And parents were already coming to Kinston on the weekends to watch football games and basketball games. So then they would stop for dinner. And so the next thing you know, we had right away people who were from New Bern or Jacksonville or Goldsboro who had eaten in the restaurant and were telling people. And instead of having to draw from a town of 20,000, we were now drawing from a region of, this will shock you, of 600,000.
Wow.
Because eastern North Carolina, within 60 miles of Kinston, is a population of 600,000 people.
And you had 100% market share of fine dining right away.
Right away.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right. Exactly.
That's pretty great.
Exactly. And people were, because of that, they were much more forgiving in a lot of ways, I think, than I was used to in the restaurant business. We made a lot of mistakes, but a lot of people let us grow. We were both young. They saw us both in there every night. And I think that, that tugged on their heartstrings a little bit. So when we overcooked their steak or spilled a beer on them, or
they could see me crying at the pad.
Yeah. He forgot to go to the table after 15 minutes.
Well, and to be honest, I think you're both very personable people. So opening up your hearts and kind of leading back to where home was for you, Vivian, was exciting and a means for people being forgiving in the learning stages.
Yeah.
I read that some of your customers were kind of expecting a golden corral where you could get your steak and potato and your dessert bar.
Don't forget
They were
Thousand
hoping
Island.
for it. They were hoping for it. My parents were the first people that were surprised by the fact that there was not going to be a salad bar In fact, we have what we call a kitchen bar at Chef and the Farmer, and in the building out phase, they had just assumed that meant that's where the salad bar would go.
They did. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then when we opened, and that was not the case, it was very confusing. And
did they ever come to visit you up in New York and go to whatever that restaurant was that you guys met at?
The Voyage.
Scarlett did.
And Dad came up to New York separately. There was a period of time in New York when we thought when we moved back here that we would try to raise pigs on the ground.
As opposed to in the air, I mean.
not in the house. We didn't want him we didn't want him in the house.
That would be great. Floating pig farm. I imagine that the rural setting makes for some great farm-to-table items. What are some of the things that people really love to eat?
Well, around here, we have a fairly defined pantry of fruits and vegetables. So collards, cabbage, mustard and turnip greens, turnip roots, rutabagas, blueberries, strawberries, watermelon, tomatoes, very classic Southern ingredients. And I was really fixated on having farmers here grow things that they were not already growing, like lemongrass and Asian greens. And it took a long time for anybody to get on board with that. And now I really only have one person. But
did they start coming to you and say, hey, I think this restaurant's going to make it. I want to grow for you?
That happened eventually, yes. And, I think more often than not, people would express an interest in their circle of like, hey, I want to try farming. I don't know how to go about it. And then they'd hear, well, this couple's got this farm-to-table restaurant. It looks like they're going to make it. You should go and see what you can grow for them. And we've worked with a bunch of people over the years in that capacity.
So what was the turning point that made you aware that the restaurant was going to stay?
I'd say 2008 when the economy tanked. And, I was talking to friends who were running restaurants in the Triangle and elsewhere, and they said, we were serving like 10 people last night. And I'm thinking, geez, we were like full. And it became clear to us that we had something valuable that we should nurture and really respect.
Well, you're serving a population of 600,000. They might be serving a population of 40, really, when it gets down to it.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some advantages in that way for us. I still get a kick out of this, but, people from the East, I think this is kind of a Southern thing in general that I've grown to really love, is they'll call and they'll say, I'm so-and-so from Goldsboro, or I'm so-and-so from Greenville. I'd like to make a reservation tonight. So it was really easy to keep up with who was from where. And, that was a half an hour, 45-minute drive to come eat with us, which is wonderful and has kept us in business. But when I was a kid growing up in Chicago, you ate in the city, which was also a 45-minute or hour drive. So it wasn't unusual to me. It took me a little while to realize that, once you live in a small town, in a small area, that's where you go.
It's a big trip on a Saturday night.
When you go to somebody else's town, you're going to somebody else's town. It's a whole thing.
Not driving to the city. That's correct.
I had a lot of wisdom to learn about in that regard, and so it was fun.
I was looking through various videos and audios about your restaurant over the years, and I thought I saw Ed Begley Jr. in one of the videos, who's a celebrated character actor.
Yeah. You have to show me that one. I'm curious now. He was the bike rider.
Yeah.
He used to ride his bike all over L.A. before the e-cars came in.
That's right. I thought it was the same guy, but have you had other celebrities make pilgrimages to the restaurant?
Oof.
Not pilgrimages, but one a few years ago, right after the show had started, we get a call during the day, and it's this person who says there's Samantha Bee's producer, and she's in town, and she wants to come eat at the restaurant. And I thought it was a prank. And so I said, tell her she can get a reservation like everybody else. And I was wrong. It was her, and she was a fan of the show and was incredibly excited to come and came and prepared to wait. And it was really humiliating and a good lesson for me in that I should not be allowed to answer messages, period. What about you, Ben? Do you remember anybody?
No, Samantha Bees. I think making a pilgrimage to Kinston is
That's a pilgrimage.
It's a pilgrimage, yeah.
It's not a direct flight from anywhere.
Yeah.
Our local star, Joe Kwan, who's also a modernist homeowner here in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Joe's been there.
Has
and
been there
Scott
quite a few
Avett,
times.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
He came with Scott. Actually, that reminds me, they had just shot the last episode of Letterman. They were on the show. And their bus ride back, they took to and had dinner at Chef and the Farmer.
That was also on an episode of the show, correct?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that whole band are big into modernist design.
How did the PBS series get started and pitched?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I always wanted to be a journalist, and I had kind of given up on that idea, but obviously was not really able to let it rest. And I wanted to make a documentary about the food traditions of Eastern North Carolina and the people who grew that food. I felt like the farmers that I worked with were really interesting and smarter and more resourceful and creative than the narrative was in media around farmers. So I wanted to make this documentary, but I didn't know how to go about it. And Ben encouraged me to call a childhood friend of mine who also grew up in Lenoir County, Cynthia Hill, and she lives in Durham, and she made this beautiful film called Tobacco Money Feeds My Family. And Ben and I both really appreciated the way she showed the people of Eastern North Carolina as like multifaceted human beings with a specific type of wisdom. And so I eventually reached out to her. I remember calling her. Ben and I used to share an office. We sat side by side. And I called her and just prayed that she wouldn't answer. And then she did.
Why did you not want her to answer the phone?
I was just scared, you know. Who calls somebody and says, I want to make a documentary about this place that no one cares about? But she was up to experiment. And so we experimented that summer around the subject of sweet corn and putting up sweet corn and growing sweet corn. And then we decided that we were going to make it into a series. So we sent our little sizzle reel, which is like, you know, a 10-minute little snippet of what this show could look like, to several places. And eventually it ended up at PBS in D.C. And they said, we think this is really interesting. We're not really sure what to make of it. But if you make 13 of them and they're 24 minutes long, then we'll consider distributing it to our PBS programmers.
That was a guarantee as far as we were concerned. We took that and ran.
Yeah, you might as well have just handed us an Oscar.
Yeah.
Now, did they pay for these shows, or did you have to do it all yourself?
Oh, no. There was, we had to start out on a fundraising expedition, and that was not something that we had much experience with. So
we're so thankful that you did. I've mentioned before, but that's how my husband and daughter spend their evenings. That's their quality time together, is watching the show.
Oh, that's very sweet. I wish I could say the same for our family. I just mean our children have never shown much interest in it.
Really? Really?
That's probably good. I'm sure one day they will.
My daughter asked for her 6th birthday, instead of having a sleepover, going to Great Wolf Lodge, or any other thing she could ask for, she wanted to come to the Chef and the Farmer. And we were really fearful, actually, because we decided if we actually made the road trip and came down to the restaurant, that A, you probably wouldn't be there. Then she'd be really disappointed. And B, there would be absolutely nothing on the menu that she was willing to try. And so then she would pitch a fit about having driven from Raleigh to Kinston, North Carolina. So maybe her 8th birthday, 9th birthday.
It's coming. It's going to happen.
It's coming.
Well,
it's coming.
Let me just say that there will be something on the menu that she would enjoy. We accommodate a lot of children.
Agreed.
And
she
I
would
want to say this, too, and I know Ben can relate, that it's only about an hour and 20 minutes from Raleigh.
You make that trek very often, don't you?
We go to eat.
I've made it 3 times this week already, so I have very little sympathy.
We have a reality TV show here that is a film, which I won't name, but having talked with a lot of people that are on it, they tell me how it's kind of a staple of reality television. to create conflict at whatever level in order to keep the story moving. Mm-hmm. Do you guys find that you have to do some of that in filming the show, or otherwise it's just kind of a show about serving food? I mean, how do you get the storyline?
Do you vote anybody out of the kitchen?
Yeah.
So just to be completely honest, a chef's life, we do not create conflict. The narrative, the story of the show follows my professional journey. And if I have an event that I'm going to do, we will bundle an episode around that event. So that event is actually my work. And there is often conflict or tension that arises out of that work. And sometimes that tension is made tighter or worse or more palpable by the fact that there are cameras there witnessing this actual work that we have to do.
So the Charleston episode of having not enough ovens, it's been several years since I've watched it, but you were doing a large event down there and not having enough ovens and trying to figure out how you are going to make it all work. That is not a staged thing. That's real life, right?
Right. And then, learning something for the first time, like on that episode, opening a raw clam, which I'd never done before, which is not something that I was really super happy about admitting on television in front of a bunch of other chefs, because as a chef, you're supposed to know everything. But so those things, nothing that we have done has been fabricated. And like when we film at Christmas or Thanksgiving, it's actually Christmas and actually Thanksgiving. And in that way, I would say that a chef's life is really different than almost anything else on television.
Which makes you genuine. So relatable.
Yes. Well,
right.
We like to call it a docudrama, although it is a comedy, if you pay attention. But the content was, the idea for the content in the show really revolved around piecing together different components of Vivian's life and our story together, and having those play off of each other in a natural way, which would, create a lot of value for people content-wise. So, there's strong elements of family. There's strong elements of small business. There's elements of the restaurant, which is, fascinating.
Your art.
My art.
I think we've talked a lot during this podcast about the restaurant and Vivian's journey with food, but, we have seen tons of glimpses of where your art has come into play and how you have had your own separate career within the midst of. And I think your modern home, which is where we started this, is a true reflection of the two of you and your history within the kitchen, but your also history with art.
Yeah. I mean, the richness of all those things together, I think, is what has made the audience for the show so diversified and really capture a lot of folks.
It's brought a lot of viewers.
The show's lasted 5 years and is ended now. What's next? Do you have something in development?
Yes. We've been working on another show that is really kind of an evolution of A Chef's Life that will begin airing, we believe, in the fall. And we think air in prime time all over the country at the same time, which is one of the challenges. PBS distributes the show, but every programmer in the country decides whether or not they want to air it and when. And so it makes it very hard to measure the success of the show or to promote it because it's happening at different times everywhere. And so this is a big opportunity for us. Unfortunately, the name of the show will change, and none of our proposed names have been approved as of yet. So we're still working on that part of it.
Do you have a network yet?
PBS.
Okay, it's going to be on PBS. Great.
This is a new deal with us and PBS. So it'll be distributed on what's called the national schedule.
Vivian, can you tell us, will your family still be just as included, or children, and watching? That's one of the joys, has been watching them grow and seeing how their lives have meshed in with your home and your restaurant.
Right. Well, our family will continue to be a part of it. I don't foresee them being at its center, and that is purposeful. Our children have never not been on television. We started making the show when they were 3 months old. I don't think Ben nor I thought anyone was ever really going to see the show, and I thought we would just have the most amazing home videos of anyone on the planet.
And you do.
And so, flash forward 7 years, and our children are 7 years old and very aware of the camera and
Instagram hashtags.
Yeah. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but just something I think we want to understand better and just kind of take a little step back from that.
I think, we've talked about this too, but one of the truly great gifts about living in a small town, in a small community, is that having the restaurant anyway meant you were a little bit of a celebrity in a small town. So, in that regard, living in a small town and having this celebrity, even for our kids, doesn't change that much of who we are or how we go about our daily lives, because everybody knows everybody anyway. Everybody knows everybody's business. I go into the bank, people. It's just different like that. There's no anonymity.
It's Mayberry.
And so, I think for our kids, it's been a real blessing to.
Except your home is one of the few modern homes down in your area.
Well,
Vivian, in the chef's universe, do you participate as a juror or contestant in any of these competition shows that are everywhere?
I have been asked to be a contestant in a lot of those shows, but I loathe competition cooking. I think under pressure and in a competition setting, people can do really stupid things. And I really want to be able to put my best foot forward. And I don't think cooking is about competition either. I think that premise minimizes the importance and the value that what we eat is who we are. And it's not my genre, put it that way.
So again, more the docudrama than the reality show.
Yes.
Okay. Ben, I understand that your wife encourages you sometimes to think about running for mayor of Kinston. Any political aspirations for you in town?
No. No.
But he is on the rural committee, which is really working to help reshape the rural communities in our state. And so I look at that as that's his first step.
His first step to the ongoing nudge.
I have a definite interest and passion for improving communities and a rising tide mentality, and living in an area of significant need like Kinston and Lenore County. It's always present on my mind. But at the same time, I'm a little unconventional for the political sphere.
Well, I imagine that the economic development folks are just thrilled with you guys. You're really part of a little revolution there downtown.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest transitions in the community in the last several years has been this Kinston sucks, Lenore County sucks, to this place isn't that bad.
What an awesome place to visit.
Excited. Yeah, I'm kind of, and it took people coming from other places for several years for people to really, I think, own that. And then for people in the community, when they go other places and they say, people say, where are you from? Oh, we're from a little place in eastern North Carolina. Most of the time you don't even say you're from Kinston because people don't know. And then, the next thing you know, the person they're with is saying, oh, I watched this TV show, and, and it becomes this whole bonding experience.
Have you ever seen that show?
Yeah, yeah, and a source of pride, which is something that, when you don't have something to talk about in that way, makes it difficult. People are embarrassed by being from eastern North Carolina, and I think, that's starting to change, and that's where the seeds are sown.
So I have followed along with the art scene and Stephen Hill's revitalization. Can tell us more from your perspective, being an artist and, knowing that you have this successful restaurant, not one, but two in town, how the art has played into revitalizing and changing the scene in Kinston.
Well, I think, one of the things that Stephen is really focused on is making this a place where young people can enjoy.
Want to come,
right.
stay.
And, for a lot of people who, their kids have graduated and grown up, they've given up in the area. If their kids are going to have an opportunity, they're going to have to move. And I think Stephen really saw that as something that he wanted to change. And so this arts community is an ambitious project to address that major concern by having affordable housing for young people and artists in particular, and providing a sense of community and place for for people to grow and develop that's affordable. And then still have, the things that artists like a coffee shop or a couple of watering holes, a place to eat pizza, a place to go out for, good
oysters,
food, things that are important. And having lived in a lot of those neighborhoods in New York and Chicago, that's always the first sign that a neighborhood is starting to turn around is a coffee shop.
You have a local coffee shop. And we heard those people on the way down to the beach were bringing a Starbucks pretty soon, too.
That's been a rumor for a long time.
When we were on our visit, our group as North Carolina Modernists, so we brought a group of 25 plus, down to Kinston in the pipe dream that we would get to meet Ben and Vivian. And I worked really diligently to try to connect. We were definitely coming to the restaurant. We were going to the brewery to see the brewery, and we had several other stops along the way. And we were surprised when Ben greeted us on our tour bus outside of his home. Vivian gave us a great surprise little cocktail hour and gave us a pawpaw demonstration. We weren't really sure what pawpaws were, but we learned.
An impromptu pawpaw.
An impromptu cooking, which was fantastic. Vivian, I very recently was just in my mom's kitchen and noticed a little cutting board that has been there my whole entire life, and finally looked at what it said, and it was a picture of a pawpaw. And I thought, oh my goodness, I know what that is, and it's all because of Vivian and Ben. Where I was going with that was we heard such great positive things when we were traveling as a group from Raleigh coming to Kinston about how special it was to be a part of this revitalization process that's happening in Kinston right now, which is so exciting.
One of the things I'm most excited for and most proud of is when we first opened Chef and the Farmer, we had a very young staff, and every single one of them to a T wanted to leave. They all wanted to leave town and go somewhere else and do something else. And now we have a very young team again. It's kind of cycled through a very young team. And nobody says that. None of the young kids that are working with us now say, I can't wait till I leave. And to me, that's the cycle that had to be broken. And from there, anything can happen.
Vivian, Ben, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's a real pleasure to meet you finally, although I'll get to meet Vivian in person sometime in the future.
She's
Mr. J.
Right, she's right here.
You'll have to catch me on the road, my car studio.
Well, next time you come up to Raleigh, one of your 3 times a week, let me know and we'll get together.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist houses. 919-995-0550. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover 7,000 classic modernist houses, and access 2.5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Guest researcher Cindy Stratton, not her real name, sends her regards. She's at Langley this week in Deep Cover. Oops, we just told you, didn't we? All right, well, never mind. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. I'll be back soon with another finely seasoned, locally sourced, delicately prepared, down-home goodness edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.